Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Emily Gideon. I am the acting chapter director of the Colorado Sierra Club. It's so wonderful to be joined today by a great group of speakers. This morning, we've a few elected officials and a few clean energy businesses on the line. We're all going to be discussing how the COVID-19 crisis has impacted the clean energy industry, both nationally and here in Colorado. Our speakers will also be discussing how the current coronavirus relief bill being debated in DC, if passed, can support the industry. We're going to be focusing on essentially how the clean energy industry can add into the economic benefits of a holistic economic renewal plan. We've essentially done a lot of studies both within the industry and nationally on how important the clean energy industry is going to be to building back better, as we recover from the coronavirus health and economic crisis. So this is going to be a very short webinar, about 30 minutes long, with an opportunity to ask questions at the very end for about 10 minutes. You can submit all of your questions into the questions panel on the right side of your screen. Questions can be submitted on a rolling basis. We'll get to as many as we can during the question and answer session. And if you'd like to address your question to a specific panelist, just indicate that, and I can read the questions aloud during the Q&A session for panelists to respond. So we're going to go ahead and get started this morning with a speaker named Michael Rucker, who is the CEO of Scout Clean Energy. Michael Rucker was the founder of Scout Clean Energy and co-founder of Harvest Energy Services. He is an expert in wind energy here in Colorado. So I'm going to hand it off to Michael to talk a little bit about how COVID has impacted his industry.
Thank you, Emily. Like Emily mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of Scout Clean Energy. We're an owner-operator in the renewable space. So we have developed and own about 850 megawatts of wind power, and we're developing about 4 gigawatts of wind and solar around the United States, including batteries. So very, very active in the industry. I also, in my background, started out working for the industry at the Edison Electric Institute, a trade association, and also worked on the climate change negotiations at the International Energy Agency. So I've always been very motivated by the impacts on climate change mitigation that our industry can bring to the table. Another thing we bring, though, are jobs and economic activity. Flashback to December of last year, 2019, it seems like eons ago, pre-COVID. Green energy, clean energy in the United States had about 3.4 million jobs around the country. About 500,000 of those were in wind and solar. The fastest growing job descriptions in the United States were solar installer and wind turbine technician. My other company actually hires wind turbine technicians around the United States, and we couldn't find them fast enough at the time. Clean energy jobs were outpacing jobs in the rest of the economy. And here in our home of Colorado, about 62,000 people were employed in the industry. It had been growing 5% year over year from 2018. And about 18,000 of those jobs were in wind and solar. So it seems like a while ago. With COVID-19, we've seen significant effects on the industry as a result of the lockdowns and the decrease in economic activity. About 500,000 of those jobs around the United States have been lost. It looks a little positive, but with 106,000 jobs being added recently, but that's still a 15% decline over pre-COVID-19 levels. In Colorado, through June, we've had about 6,000 jobs lost. That's a total 9% decline. We did add 1,500 back May to June, but we're still crawling back at a relatively slow pace. We're expecting more jobs also when the PPP program starts to wind to a close and our people lose that support from the federal government. For the wind industry, the impacts have been a little less. It's large-scale utility, typically not as reliant on interaction with homeowners and local stakeholders. Still, we've had significant supply chain disruptions. One of the construction projects I've been working on this year saw our blade factories close down for more than 2 weeks, disrupting deliveries. We've seen permit delays, unable to have landowner meetings. Development just is very difficult. It's leading up to a relatively slow year for us next year as a result. Maybe the biggest effect we're seeing right now is tax equity markets. They've frozen for the most part, and we're not able to monetize the tax credits that drive a lot of the value in wind and solar. So what could we see in terms of economic catalysts from support for the industry? E2, I'm a chapter director of E2, has put out a report recently you should check out called Build Back Better, Faster. It looks at the positive effects that we saw from the stimulus packages that were put in place during the Great Recession that led to about 860,000 jobs and 4.3 million job years of impact, $66 billion in GDP, $330 billion in economic activity resulting from that. Clean energy can come back again and be a catalyst for the economy if we get our policies right. And I encourage you all to support addressing the tax equity issues and the employment issues in the industry in order to get back some of that job creation and growth that our industry can provide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. So our next speaker that's going to be sharing is Bill Clay, and he's the CEO of Solar Power Pros, which is based in Centennial, Colorado. I'll hand it over to you, Bill.
Hey, good morning. And as Emily said, I'm Bill Clay. I'm CEO of Solar Power Pros. We are based in Centennial, Colorado, and we focus on residential and commercial solar installations. We're a local company, so pretty much we're restricted to the state of Colorado at the moment, up and down the Front Range. And I think like everybody else, we definitely experienced impacts immediately from COVID-19 and saw immediate, at least holds on existing jobs in queue. And a lot of that in late March, early April, throughout April actually, with homeowners and businesses just being a little wary of spending money, just wanting to see a little bit more what was going to happen in those uncertain times. We started seeing the market rebound a little bit in May, and people starting to spend again and taking jobs off of hold. Some of the things that we had to do to really address COVID had a lot to do with our interactions with homeowners. 100% of our sales for at least in the residential space were done at the table with homeowners in person. And so if you've ever been in sales, you know that an in-person meeting is a lot easier to build rapport, build trust with your customers. And immediately overnight, that was pretty much transitioned down to a Zoom or video conference. And so there's been a lot of struggle just getting through that. But with that taking effect now, we're seeing some of that from a sales standpoint starting to be effective again on video conference calling. And we're starting to see the market rebound. Customers are interested again. However, it's early and recent and I would say tenuous. Still certainly unknowns out there, and with the latest snap of the virus being back out there, people are again a little wary of spending money. So some of the best things I think we could have done to help encourage that rebound and subsequent job growth back in the solar market. I think Michael did a great job at outlining some of the numbers that our industry can help support or has helped support on job growth. One of the large ones is the scheduled phase down of the solar investment tax credit. Right now that's scheduled this year. It's 26% tax credit for solar investment. Scheduled to phase down next year to 22%, and then at least residentially scheduled to phase down to 0% the year after, and 10% on commercial. So any lengthening of that would be fantastic, would help our customers know that they have some additional time to make these decisions and make these investments. One other large one is around the modernization of the grid infrastructure. Even though the numbers so far on the solar side in the residential space are low for a total percentage of homes that actually have solar on them, we're already seeing utilities push back and say that their homes cannot connect to a network because they need upgrades in that local infrastructure. They're not ready to handle potentially the feedback of energy into the grid. That could be potentially a large issue going forward as more customers deploy solar in their homes. Time's of the essence. Changes to these existing policies and support around these can continue to help solar grow and help with overall jobs, creating jobs in the industry. I really hope that Congress can take the baton and get some of this stuff passed and at least put forward before the August recess. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Bill. So our next speaker is going to be Mayor Laura Weinberg of Golden, Colorado. Golden is one of the 16 communities here in Colorado that is committed to 100% clean, renewable electricity. They've also made some really incredible commitments in the transportation and building sector. So I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Weinberg to talk a little bit about the importance of local clean energy leadership, kind of scaling up to the state and federal level.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, Golden has made sustainability a top priority since 2007. And we were proud to reaffirm that commitment last year in 2019 by adopting updated goals. As Emily said, the city is committed to achieving 100% renewable energy for electricity by 2030. And we've made additional commitments to electrifying transportation in our city, reducing carbon emissions from heating homes and businesses, and increasing energy efficiency. The Golden community also takes pride in the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We encourage additional federal support for NREL for innovation and research and to advance new renewable energy technologies. The federal government support can also help by supporting the clean energy industry. It will help Colorado, so not just Golden, but Colorado meet its greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that were set last year under House Bill 19-1261. We view Golden's commitments as a vital part of not only local sustainability, but also statewide leadership on climate action. The Climate Action Plan to reduce pollution, House Bill 1261, has the potential to protect our air and climate and also modernize our Colorado economy. Like cities across the country, Golden has taken a hit from the COVID-19 crisis. Our city revenues have been impacted, and we continue to see our small businesses struggle and people out of work. The city has been providing grant funding and loans for our local businesses and nonprofits to help our community through the health crisis and the economic crisis. At the same time, we are having to make our own tough decisions on current projects that need to be delayed, such as a planned new neighborhood park that will not get built this year, but also adding further delays to our longer term projects for investing in our city, such as a community solar garden. In 2013, we made a large investment with the installation of solar panels on 9 city facilities. That project was constructed using Golden-based solar installers and has a long-term performance contract with another local Golden business. There is strong support for additional municipal projects, including over 80% of our voters supported the use of land leased from the county for a community solar garden. Funding, support is there. Funding for such a construction project continues to be the challenge. Our Golden community supports continuing investment to achieve our energy, our water, and our waste sustainability goals. Strong federal support for the clean energy industry will help our local economy here, will help support our small businesses and create new needed jobs. It will also help improve the quality of life of our residents and our visitors to be able to continue to enjoy our beautiful outdoors and outdoor recreation in Golden with less pollution and cleaner air for all of us. So thank you for the time and happy to answer any questions later.
Thank you so much, Mayor Weinberg. for sharing a little bit about all of the exciting work happening in Golden. So our next speaker will be Representative Jason Crowe. He is Congressman from Colorado's 6th Congressional District, encompassing Aurora, parts of Adams and Douglas counties as well. Representative Crowe is a former Army Ranger, and he knows firsthand the global importance of clean energy, and has been really a leader in transitioning our economy from reliance on fossil fuels to 100% clean energy, and has been a consistent advocate for these policies that make that transition possible. So I'm going to hand it over to Representative Crowe.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to the Sierra Club for hosting this really important event and drawing attention to how critical it is right now that we have very specific and directed response to the clean energy economy at this time of crisis, to make sure that as we transition out of the crisis mode, that we are setting ourselves up for success in the recovery mode. And I'd like to just associate myself with remarks of Michael and Bill and Mayor Weinberg, agree with much of what you all said and outlined today. You know, one thing I'd like to just say at the outset is I want to debunk this notion that we have to choose between a strong economy and protecting our environment and addressing the existential crisis of climate change. That is not the case anymore. This is not a binary choice. We actually are at the point where we can and we must do both, that there is an overlap now between a strong economy and building an economy of the future and having the jobs of the future, and actually doing what's necessary to address the crisis of climate change. Those now overlap. And you know, all these jobs that are being developed within the clean and renewable energy sector and the potential for further development. You know, I tell folks all the time in Colorado that we have to choose. Do we want those jobs to be in Asia or in Europe? Or do we want them to be in Brighton, in Aurora, in Centennial, in Littleton, and throughout the Front Range and throughout Colorado? I think the answer to that is very simple. We want those jobs here. They're the jobs of the future. And that's not going to happen without some very specific work and us advocating for those. So here's some things that we need to do. Number one, we need to meet the crisis of the moment. We have to address the stimulus needs. We have to pass another round of stimulus funding to provide support to local communities, to the cities like Mayor Weinberg leads, the counties that were left out of prior rounds of stimulus, so that we are stopping the bleeding, so to speak, at the local level. That includes making infrastructure investments, and that includes doing things like stopping the phase out or the phase down of programs like the ITC that Bill just mentioned. We have to make sure we're providing relief and stability, stabilizing that industry, but preventing the phase out and phase down of those programs, ITC and others, removing the cap on clean electric vehicles, and other really important measures that will incentivize investment and promote the recovery of that industry. The second thing we need to do is make the investments in infrastructure that are so long overdue in America. You know, when the United States has historically invested in infrastructure and people, and that usually has taken the look of, you know, roads, bridges, electrical, and then education in terms of investment in the people, those investments have always paid for themselves, always, many times over, right? We need to rebuild America, and that includes rebuilding a 21st century energy infrastructure. As campers and hikers like to say, this is a kind of a Colorado camper saying, the long pole in the tent. Everybody knows that the long pole in the tent is the important pole, right? So one of the long poles in the tent here is transmission infrastructure, right? We have to be able to move electricity from where the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, and we need to be able to store it. And that takes a long time to do. You know, we know we are out of time in dealing with the crisis of climate change. It's going to take a decade or more if we start today to build that transmission infrastructure. And it's the role of the federal government to help make those strategic investments and do it on a national and regional scale. And I'm happy to support an infrastructure package that would do that. The other thing we need to do is work with labor and work with workers to make sure that the transition is equitable. As we decarbonize our economy, there are workers with incredible skills that are needed to make that transition. We have to make sure that that transition from the fossil fuel economy to the renewable energy economy and clean energy is equitable for them and equitable for the country. That we take those skills and there's a seamless transition into that new economy. And that again is a role that from my perch in DC, we can help do with job retraining programs, with incentives, and with equitable transition programs as well. Then the last piece is national security. We do know that climate change is the national security issue of the 21st century. As massive population migration, refugee population displacements, the changing of the environment, water flows, everything else, famine, all of these are drivers of insecurity and instability throughout the world, and they're going to be greatly increased as the climate changes. So we have to get our arms around it. And as a member of the Armed Services Committee, I've been one of the leaders in Washington on making sure that the Department of Defense continues to make investments in the transition to a clean economy. Because when we unleash ourselves from the tether of fossil fuels, we are actually safer. We have less reliance on foreign governments and others for our national security needs. And we actually save money too. I like to use the example of all the microgrid projects because what people don't realize is the Department of Defense is actually the leader in renewable energy for the federal government. Over 20% of its energy comes from clean sources of fuel. And Fort Hood, Texas is a great example. They built out a microgrid at Fort Hood, built wind and solar farms, and it's now powered by clean energy. And it's saving taxpayers millions of dollars. It's good for the environment, and it's less susceptible to cyber attack and extreme weather as well. We can duplicate that at our major military installations around the world, and it's good, again, for the bottom line for our budget, good for the environment, and we're going to continue to push for those efforts. So there's a lot that we can do, that we must be doing, the urgency of the moment. Look forward to working with the leaders at the local level, and the private level as well, Michael, Bill, and so many others that are doing great work. And I thank you again for the opportunity to speak about this important issue.
Thank you so much, Representative Crowe, for that comprehensive overview of sort of what's at stake, what some of the benefits can be about making this investment at a federal and local level, and a little bit about the importance of this in the long run. So huge thank you to Representative Crowe and all of the other speakers. I'm going to pause for a moment to see if there are any questions in the chat for any of the speakers. At this time, I don't see any questions. So we have been recording this, and we're going to be sending it around to folks to ask some follow-up questions. So please feel free, if you've been taking a look at this, just to send in some questions for any of the speakers to us, and we can be sure that they go to the right panelist. So one important note I'm going to make is that in closing, the importance of us meeting today is that it's really important to note that Senate Republicans are expected to introduce their version of the next coronavirus relief bill today or tomorrow, but we're thinking it's unlikely to include the specific support the clean energy industry and its workers desperately need. As Senate legislative negotiations between the parties continue and the differences between recently passed House bills like the HEROES Act and HR 2 are worked out, we think there's a significant opportunity for folks like the leaders on this call, congressional leaders who support clean energy, to ensure Congress passes a relief bill that helps protect the clean energy industry, helps us build back better, and gets many of its workers back on the job, and can even continue to get new workers on the job as this industry grows and continues to power our clean energy future.
Could I make a comment about that, Emily?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point because they're going to take this bill up. This is an economic issue. There's a hostility in the Senate and some of the proposals to the economy, to Colorado jobs and American jobs that I don't understand. If they want to keep people employed, if they want to grow our economy, if they want the jobs of the future and middle-class jobs, we need to pass a bill that provides that stimulus and gets us through this crisis and gets us on the road to recovery. And anything half measures or no measures are just bad for the economy and bad for Colorado families. So it's really important that folks here, our senators here from Coloradans, that middle-class families and job growth and economy is important to them, and that as stimulus take that into account, and we do what's right to get our nation back on track.
Thank you so much, Representative Crowe. Well put here at the end. And so I'm going to conclude our call at this point. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And if you have been watching, if you have additional questions or would like to speak to any of the speakers individually or their representatives, you can reach out to Summer Sheikh, who is the Sierra Club's regional press secretary. You can reach her by phone at 774-545-0128 or by email at sumer.shaikh@sierraclub.org. So thank you again to our incredible speakers, and we'll continue to push for a great clean energy package as part of the coronavirus relief package here. So thank you all.